Thank you, Chris, for that lovely session, just so that we can all be more grounded and not let our minds fly all over the place, which is usually what brings upon all the anxiety and also the unhappiness in life. So, yes, please click on your emoticons if you feel that that session was really helpful and something that you can actually do anytime on your own. And I'm going to post that short practice on YouTube so that you can actually replay it and practice again and again and again. And this is how we help ourselves to train our mind to be calmer and therefore become kinder, which is what we all need, kindness towards ourselves and others. But first to be kind to ourselves, otherwise it's really hard when we are drained out of kindness. It's like an empty tank. So today we're going to have Chris talk about how to reduce stress in caregiving, as caregiving is now a big topic as our parents are aging, families are smaller, and also juggling that with caring for our own children. If you have children, that adds on another set of responsibilities that's pretty heavy. So Dr. Willard is a lecturer at the Harvard Medical School. He's a clinical psychologist, and he has been treating people with anxiety and depression. And also he has a lot of books that he's written. They're incredibly good. I mean, I think he's such a talented author as well as a teacher. And I'm looking forward to him coming in December, meeting at Phuket to host a retreat for all of you. So give yourself a treat. You all deserve it, and hope to see you at in Phuket. So I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Willard to give his tips and also his insights into how to reduce stress in caregiving. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Angie. And it's such a pleasure to be with you, even virtually. My goodness, I think about we first connected before the pandemic. It's gonna be out there, gosh, 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, I can't even remember. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, and then we were doing things online, and then we finally got to meet in person just about a year ago. And then last summer, you were in Boston, and Sarah Lazar and you and I were cruising around town and the medical school and all kinds of places. And I just feel so grateful for our friendship and just continued collaboration and just the wonderful conversations around these topics that are so challenging. They're so challenging for me personally these past few years, before, during, and after the pandemic, but ongoing with this caregiving for caring for the caregiver. A little bit of a tongue twister. It's also late at night here. I'm a little tired. But been thinking about this a lot. This really came up for me a few years ago. My mother was diagnosed with cancer. I was actually at a conference of 5,000 therapists, and my mom called me right before I was supposed to get on stage and told me she had cancer. It was a big, important conference here in the US, and I was so nervous. And then I was like, well, if there's anywhere that's good to be, it's at a conference of 5,000 therapists. Meanwhile, I had little kids at home and trying to manage them. And these past years have been this journey of, we call it here in the US, we call it the sandwich generation. Like, we're getting squeezed with caring for our kids, caring for our aging parents, trying to care for our relationship, trying to care for things at work. Of course, my job too is as a caregiver. I'm a therapist, right? So it does feel like it's just giving, right? All the time, it feels like giving. And these choices that feel so impossible. Those years that my mom was so sick, it was like, these wrenching choices. Do I take my kids to soccer practice? Do I take my mom to her, one of her many chemo appointments? Do I try to be present for my wife? Do I go to work today, right? Where do I fit in any of this and all of this? And it is just so many of us with these questions. And I don't know if I have answers. I have responses to these questions and some things I've tried and some things I've explored. And I think in some ways these uncertainties and these being pulled in directions is it's a little bit of a koan, right? There's not like one clear answer, but the more we look at it with mindful eyes, with eyes of compassion toward those around us, eyes of compassion and open heart toward ourselves, I think something like an answer emerges, or something like an answer in that particular moment emerges. Right? Mindfulness is that moment to moment awareness so that we can respond, not react. And I think in this time when we're feeling pulled in so many directions, finding that stillness is key when we have so little stillness in our world, finding a little bit of silence, right? When silence is at such a premium, when we're caring for everybody in our lives, and again, often in our professional lives at the same time. And we don't, I was reflecting recently about the way that we practice mindfulness. And it's this funny thing, right? I go to the Cambridge Insight Meditation Center, half a world away. You go off to the Brahm Centre, one of Angie's wonderful places around the city state, right? And we go there and we sit in silence and we meditate, and then we awkwardly look at each other and we go home. And that's how it was done for a while. And then what's been wonderful actually is seeing, people like Angie and other folks more recently starting to build more community, because that's so much of what we need. Is we need community. We need brothers and sisters and other people who know what it is that we're going through. We need these conversations, and I hope we can get a little bit of conversation going tonight. I know it's not as fun on Zoom as it is in person. And we also we sit in stillness, and we don't sit in stillness just to get good at being still, right? I'm just gonna be really good at being still. Like that's not why we're meditating, right? Like we sit in stillness so that we can actually pause, reflect, and then take skillful action in the world. The more we're likely to then be able to discern those incredibly difficult, wrenching emotional choices that we have to make, and to recharge our batteries, our compassion batteries, our presence batteries that drain all day. And we don't sit in silence to just get good at being really quiet. I mean, sure, a lot of us mindfulness people, we're probably introverts already. Oh, I like this place. I just go and I don't have to say anything, right? And yet we practice silence so we can speak more effectively when it's time to speak. Because speaking truth, speaking our own truths, sharing what's going on, this is so important to healing ourselves. But we forget also that when we share our experience skillfully, we're actually helping other people too, especially when we do that in community. When we share our wisdom of what we've learned on this path of caregiving, what starts to happen is that we're actually like sharing more wisdom into the world. We're helping someone when we don't know that we're helping them, just by sharing our experience, not oversharing, right? Right, but just sharing enough of our experience that could be helpful. We don't know who that's helping in the meditation center, or on the ride home on the subway, on the transit, right? We need community, so we need these pillars of mindfulness for ourselves, and we need these little moments as well. I was reflecting recently on this guy I finished working in therapy with a little bit ago. He was this very type A, super high strung guy, lawyer, had kids late in life. And the kid, when he had his first kid, had very, very significant special needs. Angelman syndrome. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. Really very low functioning, the kid. And so his wife sent him to therapy, basically, to meet with me. Just trying to, and this was not a guy who was going to be doing mindfulness, like certainly not in the first few sessions. And yet a lot of our work was trying to slow him down, help him pause a little bit, open his heart also to this new experience. And we finished, and I asked him, like, what was the most helpful thing that you learned? He's like, well, in the 3 years that we were working together, I think the best thing you taught me was, I'm at work, working 80 hours a week. He's an attorney at a startup medical company or something, drives home in traffic and his Audi blasting the music, right? Pulls into the driveway, goes into the house, and we're just like, boom, everyone in the house explodes, right? Because he's coming in hot, right? His wife is also a high-powered lawyer. The kids are struggling, right? And he said the best thing he told me was just like when I pull into the driveway, like park, and then just 3 breaths in the car. Three breaths when I know that I'm breathing, right? Like some of our great mindfulness teachers say. And then, right, walk into the house. And then I can absorb some of what's going on in the house if it's chaos when I come in. And I cannot bring in the chaos of my long day when I walk in the door. And things just go a little bit differently when I do that. And so it is just finding these moments, right, that we have for ourselves, or finding that moment, right, with kids also. It's like when's the time to practice if we've got kids or if we've got special needs kids. And I used to joke, well, it's 22 minutes of practice while my sons and daughter are watching their TV show on the iPad, right? That's when I get a little bit of practice in. But when we do have opportunities that we can find when we do really look for them, right? We have to find those little moments. We have to make sure we give them to ourselves. There's a comedian who used to talk about the moment in parenting. The best moment in parenting, the break you get, is when you close the car door and then you walk around to the front door and go sit in. It's like it's all quiet. The kids are in the car. It's just like a carnival cruise walking all the way around the car, right? But we have to take that time, feel those footsteps, and get those moments to ourselves. Because we know with caregiving of all kinds, and what happened with my mom was she went from cancer to, it was the pandemic, and she was developing a really distressing form of dementia, Lewy body dementia. It's like Alzheimer's, but it's almost worse in many, many ways. My dad's caring for her, and I'm trying to care for her. My sister's caring for her, and we're all doing it in our own ways, which sometimes is wonderful, and sometimes just creates more conflict, right? I feel like I'm doing more. They feel like they're doing more, right? So it's not just my mom we're worried about. Now we're having conflict with each other. This is incredibly common. And siblings and families, when you're caring for an aging and sick relative or an aging and sick someone else in the family, it's incredibly difficult on couples who are trying to raise a special needs child. We know that conflict is through the roof in those scenarios, right? No one does things exactly the same, the same way, the same time all the time, right? But you add pressure of caregiving and jobs and pandemics and everything else and mental health issues on top of it, right? Boom, the stress just gets worse, and it drives us apart. It's like there's cracks in there, and the cracks just get worse when pressure is on. Okay? And we know too from caregiving for someone with dementia, it's the biggest predictor of depression, right? Highest rates of depression, caring for people with dementia. With an aging population in so much of the world, we know that that's what a lot of us are doing. So I don't need to tell you that you're stressed out. You know that you're stressed out, but I want to try to validate and normalize what's happening when we're stressed out, and how much this is really impacting us, and how we can find some ways through mindfulness, through compassion, through self-compassion, to just start to break some of that cycle, to repair some of those cracks, to give ourselves those 1-minute breaks, right? To take the time to bring our mindful awareness in informal ways to those moments that we have, because we probably don't have a lot of sit down on the cushion time. A lot of us, if we're sandwich generation and a job and everything else on top of it. People ask me a lot about, how much do I sit since my kids were born? It's like, well, not as much, but I'm glad I got that experience of being on my cushion so I can take skillful action in the world, right? That I got that experience of silence so I can bite my tongue a little bit before I say, what I first impulsively really want to say when my kids are driving me a little batty one day, or, trying to manage the rest of my family in terms of caring for my mom or something like that, right? This is why I'm grateful for having practice, and I still do practice. It's when I'm up before the kids, or it's waking up in the morning and just I have a friend who would say just 10 breaths when your eyes open. Can you get in 10 breaths? Can you get in 5 breaths? First thing in the morning or last thing at night? Or sounds. I love listening to sounds. That's my personal favorite. Right? What are the birds? What are the birds today? I'm gonna lay here in bed until I hear 5 birds or 5 other sounds. And I start out my day a little bit different right before I just grab my phone and look at my to-do list and it starts pinging at me. That starts to make a difference. And what's amazing to me about mindfulness, this has gotten much more interesting to me in recent years, is that it's contagious. So that we know from different studies, therapists like me, my day job, I'm a therapist, right? Therapists who practice mindfulness, their clients get better faster than therapists who don't practice mindfulness. Right? Doctors who practice mindfulness, their patients are more likely to trust them and follow their recommendations around health and medication and diet, more likely to take their medication. Educators do a lot of work in education with teachers and other folks in education. When just the teachers are practicing mindfulness, the kids are behaving better, they're showing up for school more, they're performing better in school, even if the kids never learn this stuff. Those of us in families, right? When one spouse is practicing mindfulness, the other spouse is, oh, we're getting along a lot better, right? More likely to compromise. Communication is better. Parents who practice mindfulness, there's better communication in the home also, more family happiness, fewer conflicts, fewer accidents in the home too. Also just people living together, this amazing study, they always set up these poor university students for these studies, but they would have one person practicing mindfulness for a week on and a week off. And then they'd interview the people around them, they'd interview their boyfriend and girlfriend, even their parents back home, and interview their roommate, things like that. The weeks that person was practicing, those other people in their lives were happier. It's kind of mind-blowing how this is contagious. It's contagious through what we call interpersonal neurobiology, or emotional contagion. It's another word for it, right? Activating our mirror neurons. Our nervous systems are talking to each other, communicating with each other all the time, right? Sending signals of safety or danger to other people. And we're reading those from other people all the time. Safety or danger, safety or danger. We know this from the research more and more recently. And so like that dad who I worked with, right, go home, if he's settled, maybe the kids are amped up, right, but they're more likely to settle when he comes home open, present, right, for the kids. They can reconnect with him, right? We can, when we're caring for someone who's being incredibly difficult, again, whether it's illness that's breaking our heart, addiction that's also causing us distress when it's in someone else that we care about, or if it's in ourselves, right? Because we fall into bad self-care routines when we're caregiving, right? Or it's a mental health issue or dementia or something like that. Is so frustrating to deal with people like that. How do we maintain our compassion, keep our hearts open, keep ourselves somewhat optimistic? Because day after day of someone's illness being unpredictable, someone's behavior being unpredictable, that's what's called in psychology, that's called a variable rate reinforcement schedule. Fancy word. What does it mean? It means that we develop what's called learned helplessness. We just want to give up and say, F it. I talk about the fight response, the flight response, the freeze response, and the F it response. You can put whatever word you want in there. Those are what we have when we're dealing with stress. We want to get away from the effort. We want to get away from the burnout. We want to get out of the burnout. as well as out of the vicarious trauma of watching someone that we care about suffering greatly, right? As well as the compassion fatigue that we feel, where just the reserves are drained out for being able to do that caring that we want to do. And then what happens? What do we say? I'm a terrible son. I'm a terrible parent. I'm a terrible brother. I'm a terrible therapist today. I'm a terrible employee today, where that critical voice starts to get active. You're not doing a good enough job. We get those musts. It's a good thought experiment. I was doing this with a group of parents the other day. You can say to yourself, whatever your role is, caregiver, son, daughter, mother, father, parent, whatever, child, friend, therapist, doctor, right? As a good caregiver, I must always blank. What's the word that pops in there for you? What are the words? I must always blank, or I must always be blank. I must always be present. I must always be caring. I must always be optimistic. I must always be cheerful. I must always be responsible. I must always be, I mean, I've been practicing for a while. I still have my list, as you can see. And you can, if you want, you can even just write down some of the things on that list, or some of the top 10, top 5 in your playlist. Whatever it is, it tells you if you're a bad son, daughter, caregiver, father, mother, right? Must I always be optimistic? Must I always be cheerful? Is that really true? Can I still be a good caregiver even if I'm not always cheerful? If I'm not always responsible, if I make mistakes? Just invite you to look at that list that you've either written down or that's in your mind, and just, can you let go of any of those? So much of mindfulness is this whole letting go thing we hear about. Letting go, letting go. What is it that says, is it Joseph Goldstein? You don't have to let go, you just have to not hold on. Jack Kornfield says, if you can't let go, can you just let it be? Can we let go in some ways of these narratives we tell ourselves about being a good caregiver, because they activate that critical voice that we all have. You know, you're the worst parent on the playground. All the other parents have their act together. Everyone else that you know, they're caring for their parents. They're showing up for them. Why can't you? Maybe we even hear it. Maybe people in our lives even say that. Maybe our parents say that. Maybe our kids say that. Maybe our siblings say that to us. We feel like they're about to. And what we want to do is try to find for ourselves a little bit more of a compassionate voice. And it's hard to find. It's really hard to find when we're stressed. I asked a group I was teaching in a course I lead, saying, what is it? Actually, I was in China a couple of weeks ago, this came up. I said, what is it that keeps you from being present and being compassionate? And it was always stress. Stress keeps me from being present. Stress keeps me from being compassionate. When I'm in a hurry, when I'm busy, when I'm overwhelmed, it actually does. Actually, stress shuts down the part of the brain where we have our compassion, where we have our patience. It shuts those off. Everything looks like a threat when we're stressed out. When we're in a hurry, everyone's trying to get in our way. We take things personally when we're stressed out. And we personalize things ourselves. We blame ourselves. Oh, I can't blame them. They're sick. I can't blame them. They're a kid. I can't blame them. They're struggling too. Who can I blame? All right, we point the finger back at ourselves. Ugh, way too often. Bad habit, hard to break. Takes practice. So we've got to practice. Got to practice. It took me so long to figure out why we call this a practice. It's because we never get perfect at it, but it's a practice. But we do it a little bit every day, or when we can, or on retreats, or at wonderful places like the Brahm Centre, or online, or in books and on YouTube. So let's practice actually a little bit of self-compassion right now. I'll just invite you, you can find a comfortable posture. You can just rest your eyes, allow your eyes to close, whatever feels comfortable for you. Maybe bringing to mind one of those moments where you did not feel so perfect. One of those moments when you felt like you fell short of that narrative. And that critical voice showed up. Such a disloyal son, such a lousy parent. And this is hard. It's hard to invite that voice. It can be really painful. But what I invite you to do as you start to hear that voice start chattering is you can just begin by just putting a hand on your heart or just giving yourself a bit of a hug. Like you'd pull a friend in, right? A friend who was not 100% perfect in their caregiving. Pull them in, you give them that hug, you'd feel that gentle warmth, pressure spreading, nervous system to nervous system, just letting it settle. Or like sometimes when we pet our animals or put a hand on a horse, it just starts to calm down. See if you can offer yourself that gentle touch. Maybe things shift, maybe they don't. And then just validating to yourself like you would again a friend or your child when you're not exhausted. Oh, that sounds hard. Oh, that's tough. This is a moment of suffering. What are the words or phrases that you would use that feel authentic to you, that feel real? You've been through too much suffering to know which of those voices do not feel authentic to you when you hear them from people. Give yourself some real words of validation. This is tough. Just name the experience, name it to tame it, like they say. This is really hard. And then validating also that you're only human, what we'd call common humanity in the self-compassion world. Nobody's perfect. I can't be everywhere at once. I can't be all things to all people. There's no right way to do this. This is too much for any one person. A reminder too, we're all in this together. There's at least 50 something, 60 people from Singapore, caregiving, struggling, suffering, overwhelmed on this Saturday morning, looking for connection to themselves, to others. Now let's send out a wish of kindness. Just all of us here, may we all be kinder to ourselves. May we all give ourselves a break. May we all forgive ourselves. Maybe I'll take a break. Maybe I'll remember that we're doing the best that we can, just sending these kind wishes out to the rest of us. And for us caregivers, it's easy to send these wishes out. So the hard part is, can you open your heart to receive them from the other 58 of us? Can you open your heart to these wishes that we have for you? That you be kind to yourself? That you forgive yourself? That you give yourself a breath? Try to open to that. Try to offer yourself that wish. That critical voice steps back in. Just ask it to step back. Just continue to offer yourself this wish for yourself and imagining what life would be like if it came true. Even for a moment. You can enjoy the sound of the bell for a few breaths as you bring your awareness back outward. Take a moment to look beyond the screen into the world and back once more to the screen. And perhaps noticing if there's a bit of a shift for yourself, or if you want to drop into the chat or responses, any reactions that you have or experiences with this mindful self-compassion break that we took, which really was just giving ourselves that gentle touch, which actually does, just like a hug does, it actually stops cortisol, the stress hormone, from circulating in the body, which actually allows oxytocin, which is the hormone that allows us to feel warm and fuzzy and safe and connected and attached. It allows that to start flowing. We then just validate our own experience. When we name our emotional experience, we tame it. Right? Some of us have heard that phrase, and that's why in many mindfulness practices, we sit, we notice our thoughts, and we name them. Right? There goes worrying, there goes anger, there goes frustration, there goes burnout, there goes F it, right? Those thoughts. Right? Actually, when we name our emotions, we do actually tame them, we regulate them. The more words we have for emotions is directly correlated with how well regulated we are. There's a wonderful new book called Lisa Feldman Barrett. It's called How Emotions Are Made. It's about what's called emotional granularity, building up our emotional vocabulary. Can we recognize our emotions in our body? Can we name them? We can actually manage them. We can have that, there's a therapy called dialectical behavioral therapy, where they talk about our rational mind and our emotion mind. It's actually based on mindfulness, this kind of therapy. Like our rational mind, when we're just like, facts and figures and plans, and our emotion mind, when we're just swept away by our emotions. Our wise mind is when these overlap. Mindfulness helps us to access that wise mind. We name it to tame it. Oh, there's the emotion, and here's the thought about how I can respond rather than react to that. I just want to fight in traffic, or fight with the other caregivers, or I just want to flee and run away. I cannot deal with this right now. right? Or we just want to freeze, right? Just so overwhelmed we're frozen in that post-traumatic, almost dissociative kind of state, or just that like, forget it. That's the F word, forget it. Kind of depression that we fall into, learned helplessness, giving up. Right? We name it to tame it. We activate actually the prefrontal cortex. You can see this happen in an MRI machine. You show people emotional scenes. You watch the amygdala, the brain's alarm system activates. It says to go into the 4Fs. And then you name the person in the MRI machine names the emotion. They say, oh, that's sadness, that's anger. You actually watch the blood flow out of the amygdala and the limbic system, and it flows into the prefrontal cortex, where we think things through and we see the future and we take perspective and we respond, not react, and we manage our impulses. And it flows into the insular cortices in the sides of our head, where we take other people's perspective. We have empathy, we have compassion. We understand where someone else is coming from. Maybe it's the person who we're caregiving for. We can start to see, oh, maybe this is what's going on. Maybe this is why they're acting that way. Maybe this is their perspective. We don't take it so personally. Or the sibling or the spouse or the other caregivers, the other people at work that were, no, we need to care for this person that way. No, we need to care for them this way, right? It's so heartbreaking that that happens. It happens. It's so hard, right? But right, we settle ourselves. Oh, I see where they're coming from. I still disagree, but I don't have to get angry about it. I don't have to lash out about it at them. I also don't have to lash out at myself about it. So we name it, we tame the emotion. We have the thoughts about the emotion, and we have the emotion itself. We can take a skillful action in the world. Right? So we validate our own emotions, is what we did. This moment of suffering, this is hard, this is frustrating. And then we connect that common humanity. And that's just a reminder that we're not alone. It's not like, oh, everyone has, everyone's got their problem. No, it's just like, no, I can remember I'm not alone. There are many other people going through this, and they all have some wisdom to share. Right? Everyone here has got, I'm here giving this talk, right? There's 60 caregivers in here who probably together have way more wisdom than I have to share with each other about how are you handling this difficult caregiving? How are you handling an autistic child? How are you handling a sibling with cancer? How are you handling this incredibly difficult job we have in mental health or in education, where the people are just losing it all the time and struggling so much? How are you caring for your aging parents or in-laws? We have so much wisdom in this room, this Zoom room, right, to connect, right, which hopefully we can in person. December when I'm there, or other points at the Brahm Centre when I'm not there. And then we just try to be nice to ourselves, right? First, for us caregivers, it's often really hard to make that wish first for ourselves. So when it comes to us like often in this practice, like first we just make a wish for ourselves. I often start with people like me who give a little too much. It's easier to make that wish for others. Then let's see if we can take that wish in. Then let's see if we can offer it to ourselves. Those are the parts of the self-compassion break as I do it. So it's the gentle touch, naming it, connecting with others in that common humanity, and then extending those kind wishes outward and receiving them back inward when we're in a